In a couple of weeks, the Jujutsu Kaisen manga will come to an end, and with it, an avalanche of varying takes on the story's quality and impact. Personally, I am less interested in predicting the plot elements of these remaining chapters. Likewise, I'm not compelled to theorize on what will happen or if a part 2 is on the horizon. I am interested in legacy and retrospection, and think that by looking at where Jujutsu Kaisen has been, we will better be able to contextualize its conclusion. Maybe this is a fool's errand, but I believe time will look on Jujutsu Kaisen fondly. I often think of a phrase used by one of my favorite YouTubers, Mike's Book Reviews. Legacy takes time. Legacy is something you sit with. Its impact isn't flashy, but subtle. Years go by, and you still find yourself discovering new angles to the story, uncovering nuance in the cracks you had never explored before. Legacy pushes back on the moment. It is often said we're prisoners of the moment, and art is no exception. Modern art is a search for the thrill, explosions of emotion, and moments that shock or surprise. Legacy suggests lasting value. Jujutsu Kaisen is no stranger to the moment. Gege's adherence to fast-paced action above all else can at times make reading the story feel like a string of different battles, all of which aim to be iconic, but few suggest lasting impact. I think that reading misses the mark of Gege's intention. For me, Jujutsu Kaisen is the perfect blend of both moment and legacy, for the story never fails to make my head spin while simultaneously infecting my thoughts for weeks to come. In this video, I want to unearth the qualities in Jujutsu Kaisen that made it, quite possibly, the defining shonen story of its generation, and predict what its legacy might become. So let's trace the steps of the story from the very start to where the manga is currently at. I'll be tackling this in chronological order, so if you're an anime only or you haven't fully caught up to the manga, no need to worry about spoilers till I get to the story arc you haven't read yet. Welcome to AniEssays. Here we overanalyze anime and manga, with each video on the channel created under the belief that anime, same as film and literature, is worthy of in-depth criticism. If you enjoy my videos, then consider supporting me through Patreon. More information about Patreon benefits at the end of this video. Jujutsu Kaisen Season 1 feels like a testing ground, a battle of established tropes versus Gege's specific tone. As far as legacy goes, the first season doesn't do a lot to separate it from its peers, but does flash moments of brilliance, especially with the hindsight of the story's trajectory. You get the feeling that Gege was never interested in the school setting, but more so in the generational struggle of sorcerers. But Jujutsu Kaisen serializes in weekly shonen, so the story's start hits all the familiar beats. We're introduced to high schooler Yuji Itadori as he awaits the final ruling on his silent execution. Before this, Yuji was a regular high school lad, the perfect athlete, a member of the school's sorcerer club, and an orphan. His parents long since gone, and now his grandfather finds himself on death's door. With his dying wish, Yuji's grandfather tells him to protect people, so when he nears his end, he will have plenty of friends alongside him. Yuji, with no family left, meets Megumi, a high school sorcerer who reveals the danger at Yuji's school. Earlier in the day, Yuji and his clubmates had found a finger containing a piece of Ryomen Sukuna's soul, arguably the strongest and most dangerous sorcerer who ever lived. Despite being told not to get involved, Yuji helps Megumi try and retrieve the finger, which leads to him doing something rash, swallowing the finger and now Sukuna occupying a part of Yuji's body. Now containing one of the most dangerous beings in existence, Jujutsu Society's higher-ups want to put Yuji to the sword. The only thing keeping him alive is Satoru Gojo, the current strongest Jujutsu sorcerer. Gojo decides to take Yuji under his protection while enrolling him as a first-year sorcerer under his tutelage at Jujutsu High, along with 2 other first-years, Megumi and Obara. It's impossible not to see shades of Naruto here. I even made a video comparing the two back when Season 1 originally aired. Naruto starts with an orphan with a demon locked in his body. While no official execution is in the cards, the people shun him because of what is locked away in his body. He then gets into a squad with 2 others and learns how to be a ninja by going on weekly missions. For Yuji, he learns how to be a jujutsu sorcerer in a similar way. Jujutsu Kaisen's first impression is a series performing familiar tropes. I know that's how I felt after watching the first handful of episodes, but Gege and the staff at Jump felt it necessary to take a few steps into the familiar before defining its own style, and that is what much of the first few arcs equate to. The first season does have strands of the story's most complex ideas. The execution in continuous attempts to remove Yuji shows the corruption near the top of Jujutsu society, and it will be a deeper theme as we meet some of the side characters like Maki. Yuji's morality gets challenged early on for what is, in my opinion, the strongest section of this first season, Junpei. After a couple Monster of the Week sequences and the introduction of the special grade curses, we meet Junpei, a high schooler who feels major isolation and has been the victim of intense bullying. Junpei is impressionable and falls to the manipulation of Mahito, while at the same time befriending Yuji. Yuji's relationship with Junpei is a precursor for the rest of the story. Junpei and Yuji create a real bond with one another, but Yuji is not strong enough to save him from Mahito's manipulation. This mini-arc defines the rules of Jujutsu Kaisen's story. Yuji's weakness and inability to save others will be a major tension between him and Sukuna, as Sukuna believes only the strong should be given life. The death of Junpei not only slaps the audience in the face, but the reality of Yuji not saving his friend will loom in the back of our minds as the scale of future encounters grows. The sequence ending with maybe my favorite fight in the first season, as Mahito faces off against Yuji and Nanami. From Mahito's surprise domain expansion to the teamwork between Yuji and Nanami, this fight shows off a major strength of Gege, storytelling through action. While not the calling card of this first season, this is an action series above all else, and Gege will continue to find interesting ways of developing his characters during the most tense action sequences. The core of the first season is the struggle between 2 species, humans and curses. Curses like Jogo view themselves as the superior race and want freedom for other curses, so they kill humans without a second thought. Yuji sees the killing of any other person as wrong, yet he has no qualms about erasing curses from the world. That struggle is at the core of Yuji's inability to save Junpei and his relationship with Mahito. But this plotline only takes up 5 of the first 25 episodes, with the rest of the first season having its ups and downs. The cast gets expanded during the test arc, and the introduction of Todo and focus on characters like Inumaki and Maki do set the stage well for what is to come, but too much of the latter half of this season feels like a sideshow to the threat of Mahito and the other special grade curses. Even when they get involved, it fails to lack the true tension that will be reached in later Jujutsu Kaisen. Season 1 actually reminds me a lot of one of my favorite science fiction series, Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Red Rising is an epic science fiction opera that explores dark themes and characters through a dystopian lens. Some of the later entries in the series would remind anime fans of Kentaro Miura's work, but the story's start is actually young adult. The first book, sharing a title of that series, is a smaller affair that feels more like a darker Hunger Games than a space opera Berserk. It is a good book, but its sequel, Golden Sun, turns the series on its head, becoming an enthralling space opera filled with galaxy-spanning battles, characters with far more depth, pacing that changes the story with every chapter, and betrayals that I'm still not over. Most fans agree that Golden Sun embodies what Red Rising is more than the book Red Rising does, but you can see that Pierce felt the need to get publishers and audience members on board with him before he took his epic and dark turn for the series. That is how I think many of us will feel about the early section of Jujutsu Kaisen's story. It has some good stuff and thematically lays the groundwork for what's to come, but the real show is just kicking off. Through 2 flashback arcs, Gege effectively resets the pacing of the story by leveraging smaller scaled events to catapult the reader into the insanity of the Shibuya Incident. Both these arcs punch above their weight class in terms of impact from page time, from the story start to Junpei's death, and then the later battles against the death paintings. Season 1 was just the surface, while the Hidden Inventory arc reveals the depth of Gege's pen. Personally, I think Hidden Inventory is the place where we see Gege grow into his own style, but I love Jujutsu Kaisen 0 and think that that short story has a strong impact for setting up Yuta's character while developing Geto and Gojo's relationship. Check out my video on Yuta if you want more in-depth thoughts on JJK 0. Hidden Inventory gave fans of Jujutsu Kaisen something different from the rest of the series. We get to spend time with Gojo as the main character and follow his beautiful but tragic relationship with Suguru Geto. I do enjoy the slice of life side to the first couple of episodes, and even though Gojo and Geto are students, it never fully feels like it because they're so powerful. Hidden Inventory is the removal of Gojo's innocence as he and Geto fail in their mission and Riko ends up dead. Above all else, character shines the most in this arc. Toji's dark aura and removal from his clan to the ruthlessness he shows towards Gojo, Geto, and Riko prove how the hierarchy of the sorcerer world has failed him. Gojo and Geto's development takes them in opposite directions. Geto now dedicating himself to removing all humans from the world, while Gojo wants to create a more peaceful world. The end of the Hidden Inventory arc sets up a defining question.
Do you think you're the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo? Or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest?
It's a question that will worm its way up time and again, but the tragedy of Riko's death hits differently than Junpei. It wasn't a shock that Yuji didn't have the power to stop Mahito, but it is a shock that Geto and Gojo together couldn't protect this girl. Hidden Inventory is a warning to proceed with caution, for what comes next will have even more despair and hype twisted within. That is what the Hidden Inventory arc is, a carefully constructed story of two friends falling apart while we get multiple battles and shocking moments that keep us coming back for more. This is the formula that makes Jujutsu Kaisen one of the best shonen I've ever seen. If you were to take the action, character moments, and ideas from the Hidden Inventory arc and triple the scale, you get the Shibuya Incident. If you've followed the channel, you know that I adore this arc. I have already made its own analysis video, and made another one comparing it to the Chimera Ant arc. For me, the Shibuya Incident is Gege's Golden Sun, where the story takes form of what it should have been all along. It is a masterclass at storytelling through action, and the plot hits you with many unexpected turns. For me, the Shibuya Incident is where you feel the effects of Gege's writing. In the moment, it will blow you away as each encounter feels like 46 shots of adrenaline straight into your bloodstream, but the action and violence of this arc is anything but vapid. Its legacy reaches well beyond spectacle, as Yuji's suffering and realization marks a stark shift in the story's outlook on morality and complexity. In terms of legacy, the Shibuya Incident has already left its mark on the anime community for the high quality of its anime production. The Shibuya Incident is where the story reaches a grand scale. If they mess this mission up, the entire world could be put in peril. The stakes skyrocket here, well past any Monster of the Week or school narratives, and the conclusion of this arc sends us into the gritty, moralistic, and amazing Culling Games. Anime fans are not ready for the Culling Games. If you are an anime only and made it this far into the video, let me give you a trailer pitch for this arc before I dive into spoilers. The Culling Games strips the fluff from Jujutsu Kaisen and gives the readers a bare and brutal look into the morality of each character. Every battle, especially one in particular, is a trial of each character's will, beliefs, and determination. The Culling Games expands the cast to some fan favorites like Hakari and Higuruma, but also introduces us to the histories of the world as if the traditions of the past grab hold of the present. Now to spoilers. I like to think of the Culling Games as Gege's Greed Island. Our characters have very specific rules to follow that only apply to this setting, and they must compete in a kind of game. For Gege, that game is an apocalyptic death battle between current sorcerers, new sorcerers, sorcerers brought back from the dead, and innocent people. Gone is the fun school vibe, now replaced with survival and death. The Culling Games are preceded by two smaller setup arcs, Itadori's extermination and the perfect preparation arc, both of which lead directly into the Culling Games. The post-Shibuya Incident chapters have an infinite feeling, like the story could go in any direction. Here, Yuta finally meets and teams up with Yuji, we meet Tengen and learn more about Kenjiku's plan, and Maki murders the Zenin clan in preparation for the games. Without Gojo, a desperation resides over all the characters, and the prospect of a death game creates an unrelenting tension that feels closer to Gege's fully realized vision for the series. While I love the aesthetics and atmosphere of the Culling Games, it is the character work conveyed through each major fight where Gege really deserves his praise. You see this through Yuta and Megumi's fights, where both of them come to terms with their own beliefs and satisfy those in the past. But without a doubt, the battle that lands with the most weight is Yuji versus Higuruma. Higuruma is a new Jujutsu sorcerer who was marked by Kenjiku. Previously, he worked as a state defense attorney who, instead of pursuing a higher career as a judge, decided to defend those he considered weak and ugly. After a retrial of his murder case, Higuruma's client was found guilty. Despite the lengths Higuruma went to prove his innocence. Overwhelmed with cursed energy and a dread for the legal system, Higuruma snaps and murders the judge and multiple people in the room, and soon enough makes his way into the Culling Games. Higuruma becomes one of the most successful players in the games because of his natural talent, which brings Yuji right to him. Yuji asks for Higuruma to help end the Culling Games, and the two of them engage in combat. This battle is emotion and idea above all else, as Higuruma enacts his domain expansion, which recreates a courtroom setting. Higuruma's domain does not focus on instant kills, but leans into his strength as a lawyer. Yuji soon gets put on trial for murdering innocents during the Shibuya Incident. With his life in jeopardy, the Culling Games at risk, the entire Jujutsu Sorcerer world on the verge of collapse, Yuji doesn't hide from this fact. Even though we know he didn't murder those people, Yuji owns up to it, citing his own weakness for allowing Sukuna to overtake his body. This battle isn't about spectacle, but character stripped to the rawest form, as Yuji owns up to his participation in needless violence, forcing Higuruma to stop running away. This encounter will shake you in the moment, and it no doubt will leave a lasting impression on all of the readers who experience it. So much of Gege's action matches this quality. Others may be more focused on the nuances of combat and not an internal struggle like we get with Yuji here, but all of them have meaning under the surface, and it's what makes the Culling Games such a pleasure to read and reread. If the Shibuya Incident was Gege's declaration of the true nature of Jujutsu Kaisen's story, the Culling Games defines that direction into a cutthroat and brutal arc. Every encounter and new character introduced adds to the story's scale and depth. The Culling Games still has Gege's knack for quick pacing, but it does settle into the story a bit more than Shibuya, which makes it the perfect follow-up. The Culling Games ending is likely the weakest element of the story, as Sukuna returns in fantastic fashion, taking the body of Megumi, but because of his presence, it forces a narrative shift to the final arc. That shouldn't take anything away from what the Culling Games accomplishes, as it gives readers a dark action-heavy focus that few in the shonen demographic are able to match. In a way, everything we will remember Jujutsu Kaisen as is the Shinjuku Showdown. Unlike all other long-form shonen narratives, Sukuna has always been the endgame, a conflict we waited for since the very first chapter. The King of Curses has been the inescapable reality of Jujutsu Kaisen's story. The entirety of the Shinjuku Showdown is the sorcerer clash with Sukuna, first with his one-on-one battle with Gojo, and and then the aftermath of that clash. Sukuna vs. Gojo is certainly a contender for the greatest shonen battle of all time. With over 200 chapters in the making, a clash between the world's strongest and history's strongest is the type of setup shonen fans die for. You can't understate the execution of power fantasy tropes here, seeing two characters with a world-shattering strength that far and away outclass every other character in the series is an event on its own, and the execution of this fight simply doesn't miss. What starts with an exchange of hand-to-hand combat quickly becomes a struggle of domains. The smallest detail becomes vitally important in this conflict, as the power level of both could leave the other dusted with one wrong move. In this fight, we get the payoff for Sukuna's prolonged planning, as he uses more raga as the ultimate trump card to deal with Gojo's technique. While experiencing this fight, you'll go back and forth on who you think will win, and our side characters do the same. Sukuna gets the upper hand, but Gojo's persistence eventually flips the tide. In the end, both are pushed far beyond anything they had experienced before, but eventually Sukuna rises above, and Gojo falls in what could be one of the most haunting page flips in all of manga. It would have been anticlimactic if Gojo had beaten Sukuna outright, and Kenjiku became the last standing villain of the story. All the same, devastation is the only emotion I can equate to what I felt when I read this moment. For a long time, I was frustrated that Gojo couldn't overcome Sukuna, even if Sukuna used more raga a lot in the battle. I think more raga is the key here, the key to the brilliance of the following chapters and the conclusion of Sukuna's story. Sukuna's strength is his own. Everything he does is in pursuit of his individualism rising above the rest. Sukuna only cares for those with strength and wants to kill above all else. Gojo took the opposite path. Gojo invested in those who had no one else, and helped cultivate the talent of Megumi, Yuji, Yuta, and others. Gojo's students defeat Sukuna in the end, and in a way, Gojo wins the fight, because he doesn't use his strength to get rid of the best, but to uplift those around him so they collectively overcome Sukuna. After everything he went through, almost dying at the hands of Toji Fujiguro, Gojo becomes more solid in his personal identity than Sukuna ever does. Because of Gojo's strength, he felt isolated from those around him, but that isolation didn't lead him to shut himself off from others, but to lift them up and make a world where they wouldn't have to rely on Satoru Gojo. After Gojo falls, we also get the clever fight with Kenjiku. Kenjiku turning out to be a sorcerer who longed for entertainment. This fight is one of the most uniquely bold things Gege has ever done, as the mastermind behind much of the series falls in a humorous battle of entertainment and jokes. Yet another example of how Gege continuously pushes the envelope for storytelling through action. One of the very best chapters in the series is chapter 265, when Yuji speaks to Sukuna right before defeating him. He takes Sukuna through his past and reveals the pity he has for him. Yuji started to believe himself as a cog, that he was born to fill a role and his life would have satisfaction because of it. Now he knows that humans are not bound for one purpose, and that the mundane moments of life have equal value to our greatest moments. Regardless of strength or achievements, we all have a right to live, and Sukuna doesn't have the right to take that away from people. Sukuna has prolonged his life for so long, living as the king of curses. His isolation kills him in the end, as he doesn't live a life worth living. The Shinjuku Showdown is full of iconic moments, from Gojo's fight to Yuta's domain. Every strategy has purpose, and Sukuna almost defeats them all. This climax doesn't overstay its welcome, but does feel monumental when it's over. In particular, Sukuna stands out to me. We never dove into his backstory, nor did we get some tragic justification for his actions. In many regards, Sukuna takes shonen fans back to a more one-dimensional villain. But to call Sukuna one-dimensional would be missing the purpose of him. Sukuna represents strength and violence. He kills others because of his nature, and nothing more to it than that. Yuji tries to save others because of that same nature. Jujutsu Kaisen questions our adherence to past ideologies while arguing that people are not defined by who they have been in the past, as they can reforge themselves. Gege shows that the smallest moments in our lives have meaning and purpose, even when society tells us that we should be doing something great with our lives in every moment we have. Sukuna represents that force of what unbridled strength and power means. A hollow life where your death leaves you isolated and alone. Sukuna has the power that many characters would die for, yet he fails to achieve anything meaningful with that power. The Shinjuku Showdown took all of the previous arcs, their setup and ideas, and matched them together in a conflict that feels like the core of everything Jujutsu Kaisen represents. And with it, Gege puts a cap on his story and the ideas woven throughout, blossoming into a complex message about wariness of traditionalism, the simplicity of life, and the darkness that all humans suffer through. For my money, the Shinjuku Showdown is Gege's best arc, and will find itself in the halls of what a classic shonen arc can be. Jujutsu Kaisen's last handful of chapters have surprised me. I fully expected brutality to rear its head till the very last page of the story, but starting with chapter 265 and Yuji's conversation with Sukuna, the story has taken a more rewarding path. I think a lot of fans want Gege to take the darker route, with the merger coming to fruition and more deaths and suffering. But Jujutsu Kaisen isn't a story solely focused on the suffering of others, but believes that humans can be reborn into a new world. The ideas of the past do not have to infect and hold back the present. If traditional ways created a more exclusive and unsafe world, then maybe we shouldn't continue to perpetrate those ideas out of respect, and decide to push forward our own path. Sukuna and Kenjaku want to keep a grip on the present day after their lives should have come to a close, so it's the job of the living to not let those ideas overstay their welcome as we push forward past the darkness and suffering of life to protect as many people as we can. Jujutsu Kaisen will always be remembered for having some of the most well thought out, exciting, brutal, and thought-provoking action sequences ever to grace Shonen Jump. I think that will be its legacy in the years to come. Gege's darker tone combined with a narrative structure that always keeps readers guessing creates a wholly unique Shonen Jump experience. Legacy takes time, but I'm willing to position myself on the side that thinks Jujutsu Kaisen will be considered a staple shonen manga, a benchmark narrative for how to develop characters through action, find your voice in a popular genre, kill off characters, and of course, create an iconic climax. No matter what happens in the final chapter, I am convinced that the legacy of Jujutsu Kaisen will be connected to it being a benchmark shonen story for years to come. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I can't believe we're near the end of Jujutsu Kaisen, and I'm so curious to see what happens in these last few chapters. If you want to support the channel, then consider checking out my Patreon. Patreon is the best way to support me. Through the first tier, you get access to this channel's Discord server where I host my monthly anime buddy watch-alongs, as well as have general chats about anime, manga, and general media. In addition to that, you get exclusive Patreon channel updates and your name at the end of every video. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.